Okay, so let's go back over to this. Now we need to do is check that TXN ID has not been previously processed. Now this one's a bit more tricky. When we do successfully process a payment, we're going to log this payment in here with a TXN ID in here. So what we need to do is now connect to this table and perform a query that's going to check if the TXN ID doesn't already exist in the database. So let's go ahead and create a query. And this query is going to essentially just select this value. So I'm going to say TXN ID underscore check equals MySQL query. Oh god, I can't type today. MySQL query. So this is just essentially going to select TXN ID from log. Remember, our database name is log. So it's going to select our transaction ID from log, where our transaction ID is equal to, and this value is going to be the current transaction ID, which is just here. So we're selecting, and what we want to do next is check underneath this query is check whether we've returned any rows, and if we have returned a row, then the transaction already exists, so we don't want to proceed. So in here, like before, I'm going to break out of this string and then concatenate a value and break back onto the string, or re-enter this string, and this is just going to be TXN underscore ID. So here what we can do is we can say if MySQL num rows TXN underscore ID underscore check, that's the name of our query, doesn't equal 1, that means that it does not exist. So we're checking here, remember, that has not been previously processed, then do something. Okay, so if the transaction ID doesn't produce any records, that means we haven't already processed it, therefore we can continue in here with our code. So the next thing we need to do is check that our receiver email is your primary PayPal address or email address. So let's go ahead up here, we've got receiver email. This needs to equal alex@phpacademy.org because we want to know that the money is being sent to alex@phpacademy.org. That's our primary PayPal email. So it's again an extremely simple check. If receiver underscore email is equal to alex@phpacademy.org, then we can continue. Simple as that. So if receiver email, which is here, is equal to our primary PayPal email address, which is mine, then we can continue here. Let's just go back so that's indented properly. So now what? We need to check that the payment amount and the payment currency are both correct. Now our payment amount is 8.99 and our payment currency is GBP in capitals. So I want to say if something and then continue the code. So we've got both these variables being processed back through PayPal, and that is our payment amount and our payment currency. So payment underscore amount should equal 8.99 and our payment currency should equal GBP in capitals. So if payment amount is equal to 8.99, remember to specify it as a string rather than an actual value. And payment underscore currency is equal to double equals, remember, is equal to GBP, otherwise we're going to be assigning a value if we use a single equals. So if our payment amount is equal to 8.99 and our payment currency is equal to GBP, then we've performed the checks we need, and what we can then do is process our payment. Now there are two parts to processing our payment. The first part is adding our transaction into our database. Okay, so that was the whole point in initially checking if our transaction had already been stored. So our transaction ID needs to be added to our database after every check has been performed. So the first thing we need to do is add transaction ID to database. The second thing we need to do is update premium to 1. Okay, Yeah. Okay, so update premium to 1. So the first thing we need to do is add the transaction ID to the database. So we need to create a query for this. So we're just going to say log_query is equal to MySQL query, as you'd normally perform a query from PHP. Now what we want to say is insert into, and our database table is called log. So we need to insert 3 values, remember, the log ID, which can just be left blank because it's an auto increment, and the transaction ID and the email that's been paid from. And all this information is available from here. So PayPal really makes this easy for you to do because it already provides you with a script with all the variables that are passed back from PayPal. So insert into log values, and then in rounded parentheses we need to say 1, 2, 3 values. The first one is the log ID, which is just an auto increment. The second is the transaction ID. So in here we can just break out and append on here, or concatenate on the transaction ID. Remember, TXN_ID is the transaction ID from PayPal. Okay, so now we need to put the email address of the user that's paid with. So this variable, if we come up here, is payer_email. So whatever email address that I pay from, this is going to be equal to well, payer.email is payer_email is going to be equal to this. So now what we've done is successfully logged our transaction. And now what happens is if this process is repeated, we are then checking here if we don't already have this transaction ID stored. So if you didn't understand the point of this in the first place, now we've got to actually inserting it, you'll understand that this is why we don't want to repeat the transaction if it's already been completed.